to go.
Isabel, we're live.
Thank you very much. Welcome. I would like to call this meeting to order of the Communications Subcommittee. And before we begin, let me reintroduce, if you have not met her, Marianne Dequina Villablanca. She is the Associate Director of the Board Relations, working with Chairs John Thomas and Maria Bonville, and she'll be assisting us this morning. So before we move forward, Marianne, could you please call the roll?
Yep. Kim Barrett.
Present.
George Blumenthal.
Here.
Leandra Clark Harvey.
Present.
Isabel Duron.
Here.
Mark Fisher Colbury.
Here.
Larry Goldstein.
Here.
David Higgins.
Here.
Pat Levitt.
Here.
Linda Malkus. Lauren Miller-Rogan. Jonathan Thomas.
Here.
Art Torres.
Here.
Okay.
Thank you, Marianne, and thank you all for joining us and joining the Communications Subcommittee, which has been inactive for a number of years. I think this is really critical at this time and a very crucial, I think, to the next work of CIRM. And it's also good to see the chair, the vice chair, and the president here with us this morning, as well as we believe some members of the public who have joined us. So thank you all. And at some point, we will have opportunities to get get public comment as well. So I hope that during our discussions, we're going to hear from you all what we can do to utilize and support our really solid communications team to increase awareness about CIRM, its work, and just as importantly, to support the young investigators pipeline through our Spark program. I think that is really crucial to share with the public to understand that there is opportunity for our youth, including from racial and ethnic communities. It's been made very clear and intentional in our strategic plan that was presented recently by Maria Milan that our vulnerable populations and those with historically less access also must be served by the benefits of the stem cell research. And the support from the voters this past year for refinancing CIRM is giving us this new opportunity to increase outreach and inclusion of racial, ethnic, and other underserved groups. And I also think we need to support a plan that keeps all of our communities aware of the wonders of science along with the challenges. That's where this subcommittee, I think, can be most helpful in making sure that our communication strategies are smart, targeted, culturally and linguistically inclusive, and that they increase awareness across the state so that residents and taxpayers know that we are stewarding their dollars thoughtfully. This is not about, as far as I'm concerned, burnishing the image of CIRM. It's about making sure the public is aware of the wonders of what CIRM and STEM can do and make sure that they come to understand its work. That while the research doesn't always hit a home run, it moves the knowledge base forward, and that CIRM is committed to be transparent, authentic, and diligent in its care of the people's trust and investment. Good communications can make a difference. How it's done is the challenge. So we welcome all of your thoughts and your ideas today. And before we move on, I'd like to ask the co-chair of the Communications Subcommittee, Pat Levitt, to make some comments. Pat?
Well, thanks very much. I am excited to join the committee. I don't need to repeat what you've just stated because I think it was really eloquent and right on target. I think communication for me, the importance of it is not just in terms of the public understanding what CIRM is about and what we're doing, but to engage the community in authentic partnerships to encourage the community to participate with us in this journey. And I speak to issues around public and communities participating, having the opportunity and understanding the promise of participating in research themselves. And I think that's a really important component of what what must be inclusive in terms of our goals for this subcommittee. So it's telling who we are and what we do and why it's important, but also to translate the opportunities for greater participation. So I'll turn it back over.
Thanks, Pat. Here, here. So the first item on the agenda today is the proposed Communications Subcommittee mission statement. So Marianne, would you put that up, or maybe it's Katie? Read and you'll consider.
Do you
Correct?
guys see it up?
Okay, yes, I do. Does everybody see? Okay. There was, I think, in the past, a very long statement. I think we need to be short and sweet and to the point. So as a state agency, CIRM takes its responsibility seriously to educate the public about the programs that have their impact on the lives of the people of California. The Communications Subcommittee shall be responsible for overseeing the communications with the public, helping guide best practices and providing recommendations to ensure effective, linguistically and culturally appropriate delivery of information to California's diverse audiences in an inclusive and equitable manner. The subcommittee shall meet at least twice a year to assess progress towards achieving the goals agreed upon for the communications team. So on hearing that statement, is there any comment from any members of the committee that thinks we have missed something, need to say something else? Please weigh in. I don't want to stop this lively debate.
Larry Goldstein has his hand raised.
Please, thank you for that, because I'm not seeing it.
No
Thanks,
problem.
Larry. Go ahead.
Okay.
Thank you. So first of all, I'll just say, I think the mission statement is actually pretty good. I think what's missing for me, and maybe this is inside baseball, is how does this group and its activities interact with Kevin McCormick? And is this captured in the statement, do you think?
Well, I know we're going to hear later in just a moment from the whole communications team. So we'll hear more of that, Larry. But can you, well, maybe we should ask Kevin, do you see yourself missing in this? Or does the communications team see itself missing in this? And do we need to perhaps have a sentence number 2 that talks about that? Because you'll hear more, Larry. That'll be explained.
Isabel, I think once we go through how the team is structured, because there have been changes to the team, I think then we could circle back to Larry's comment and see if it becomes more clear as to how the interactions would go. But generally, I would say, board members are always welcome to reach out to any members of the communications team if they have questions, issues, or things that they would like resolved. And we as a team together would get together and talk about how to get that and move it forward. And talk to the president and CEO and the chair if necessary.
Okay.
Yes, what she said.
Thank you, Kevin. Well, I think if we want to vote on a
Leandra has a question.
statement, we need, I don't know if we need to have those questions satisfied for the various board committee members and before we actually vote. So does anybody want to, 1, make a statement, 2, hear from and about the strategic plan or the strategic committee team, subcommittee communications team, hear about them, and then know that the mission statement reflects what we're talking about? Was there another handout? Go ahead.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a
Leandra
couple.
and Mark.
Okay.
Mhm.
To back up for a
Yeah.
second. So I love I love the statement. I love that it calls out linguistically, culturally appropriate delivery of information, really focusing on equity mission. What doesn't seem to fit is the last sentence where it's talking about subcommittee structure and frequency. Like that's typically not a part of a mission. That's typically a procedure or a process. And I think if we include that, then that's going to then call out, well, should we have other things about our procedure and process and frequency and connection to other groups? And I think that might be where that could lead to. So to keep it clean, I would advocate for removing that last sentence and finding a more appropriate place, in my view, to put that, because that's more about procedure process. What if we change our procedure process. We don't have to change our mission statement. So those are just my very cursory comments more on structure and organization. But other than that, I think it does capture nicely our goal and gives us the flexibility to do a lot.
I appreciate that thought, Leandra, because in some ways it does feels like the activity to support the mission statement. But I also, my first thought on reading that, and still remains, is only twice a year? How are we going to help with the big lift by meeting twice a year, right? So we may even want to reconsider that. But Maria, what is the next step we should take about this? Should we just
We can remove that.
Let's hear from other people and then we'll decide.
Sure.
Mark, I think your hand is up.
Yeah, I concur with the last comment. That shouldn't really be part of the mission statement. Those are operational decisions. We could decide to be monthly, weekly, once a year, and all those other elements. I think one of the questions that touches on exactly how this would work from an organizational functional perspective that was just brought up also. It has to do with the bearing of the language of responsible for overseeing the communications with the public, because you might consider the prospect of, rather than direct overseeing, is that we're advising, guiding, suggesting responsibility or communications to the folks that have the real responsibility for this. If you can see the distinguishment, so we're not then in a position of, hey, the communications committee's got to review press releases and kind of from a mechanistic perspective, that should be the responsibility of the staff. And we're providing a guidance, support role or function. And that's not to mitigate or to minimize the role of the committee, but just not this kind of direct overseeing language.
So would you give us a substitute word for that? Did I hear one rather than oversee?
How about advisors?
Yeah, I think, advise, advice or guidance, I think are wording that could be woven in there that would be more directly on point with the function of the committee.
Okay, so Maria, can you tell me if we're making the corrections here or someplace so we can eventually read it back following corrections or additions or subtractions?
Sure, Marianne, can you, so I would say, let's take out the last sentence.
Mm-hmm.
And then how about the communications subcommittee advises?
Shall be advisory for communications with the public.
Okay, sounds good to me.
Let's see, where's hands? I don't see a hand raised.
George has
I
his hand raised, JT, and David Higgins does.
Okay,
So,
George.
Okay, thank you. Two quick comments. First is another potential editorial change. In the first sentence, I thought it would be more succinct to just, instead of saying programs that have their impact on the lives, just say programs that impact the lives of people of California. Because that really shows that it is, I think that's just a more direct statement and less wordy and shortens a statement, a mission statement that wants to be as short as possible. So that's one suggestion. The second comment, and this isn't really suggesting a change, but the first time I read through the statement, it wasn't clear to me that this included the issue of reaching out to all populations, including underserved populations, to encourage them to participate in programs, being run by CIRM, for example, clinical trials, for example.
Right.
So, I think it does do that to some extent, but not quite as explicitly as I thought we might have wanted. So I just wanted to point that out.
I don't disagree with that nuance, George, but I'm wondering if once again that is part of the strategic planning that you'll hear from the communications team. And yet, since we've talked about being intentional and want people to understand that intentionality, whether it has to stand out there very strongly and firmly. But let's hear for some other folks on that. I think next up in the Hollywood Squares is JT.
Oh,
Let me get off mute here. Yes, I had exactly George's point number 2. It wasn't clear to me that was making it explicit that in addition to communicating to the public to inform them so that they have a solid understanding of what we're doing, that we need to make it clear that part and parcel of that is making opportunities available should they need it from a patient participation perspective. So it's same as George, same thing.
Okay. Let me stop and help Marianne here for a minute as I'm looking at this. Marianne, in the first sentence, the programs, sentence number 2, programs that impact the lives.
impact the lives. Okay.
Yeah, of the people of California. The Communications Subcommittee shall be advisory for, it sounds weird to me, but I haven't quite, it shall advise the it shall advise the communications. Sorry, I'm trying to think on that. It just sounds strange to me, but I'm not.
Maybe advise on.
There you go. Advise on. Yeah. Shall advise on. So.
Or provide advice regarding.
Oh, wait. Shall,
Yeah, she has to get rid of B.
okay, right.
Shall advise on communications with the public, help. So we now need to turn those help guide best practices and provide. Maybe it's after this that we need to insert or need to add a sentence that addresses the concerns or the desire to help the public understand that we want their engagement. But let me ask a few other people who had their hands up if I've missed them.
David Higgins.
David?
Yes, thank you. I don't want to overanalyze this because everything you've done is good work and it's a keeper. But I was just going to throw in that what the communication committee may be responsible for that would help describe this is the report between the communication committee or the communication team, whoever goes out and does communication, including people like Kevin. They're the body. The committee is the body that reports back to the board, the whole board, and demonstrates to the board that what the communications effort done at CIRM is consistent with the mission statement. So I'm saying mission statement, the implementation of the mission statement, the communication board that analyzes and determines whether the mission statement is being met, and then the board, and see that as a part of the tool of communication across there. That's
Okay.
just another way of thinking.
So there may be a couple of extra sentences that we have to add, including the role of the communications team is beyond the role of the communications subcommittee is also to report back to the whole and keep them apprised of the work. I mean, I'm just talking off the top of my head, keep them apprised of what the communications team is doing, although we can also have Maria and join us and help provide that feedback loop. Mm-hmm. But I think we should add a couple of extra sentences in here. I don't think it's going to make it overly long because we shortened it so much, and that's good to see. But I think, and maybe Art or JT, you can help us formulate the other sentence, or George, about the a critical part of communications is to engage the public in participating in the critical research that CIRM and or the applicants or the scientific researchers will be working on. there in and of itself is a sentence that needs to be worked on. But JT or Art, perhaps you have some ideas on that?
I just think you ought to revisit this and put it over until the next meeting. I don't think the mission statement is necessarily necessary for us to move on with our communications, which we know what we need to do. But this is taking a little bit too long to redraft a statement that maybe should come back to us after there's been more input and more editing.
Oh, well, that's why we're talking to you, because we wanted the input. But second of all, could
No,
you?
I'm talking about later. In other words, bring back a finished document with all the input that we received today, not mine, but everybody else's. That's all.
Right. Could Mariana, just for our remembrance, could you put an A, a B and a C under those, and the B would be reporting back to the board and the whole board, and the C, which would be the critically that we make sure the communications serves the purpose of engaging the public in participating in clinical trials and or other scientific endeavors that CIRM supports. That's just broad, but does everybody
repeat the last part?
But it's not really that broad, because a lot of the language you just suggested is within the initiative already as well. We can just take it from there.
Okay, so we don't reinvent the wheel. We'll take a look at that. But sorry, that was just generally make sure that the communications continues to invite the participation of California residents as needed, California residents as needed in our research and clinical trials. I mean, we can play with those, but we'll look back at what has been said. But does everybody agree that we should continue to nurture this a bit and outside of this meeting, and then we can come back with the next honed mission statement?
Pat and Mark both have their hands raised.
Okay, thank you. Pat first, I guess.
Yeah, I'm just a little worried. We can revisit this, but I'm just a little worried about including language that has to do with procedures and policies. It's the same comment about, how often we're going to meet. This is an outward facing statement that's supposed to engage with the public, and it's not clear to me that the public needs to understand in a mission statement how the committee relates to other component parts of CIRM, as opposed to the mission we have as a communications subcommittee, and the important work that we need to do in terms of from the public's perspective and from our perspective of how we relate to that. The other components are part of policies about and the bylaws of how the subcommittee is supposed to operate. So it's going to become a longer statement. The length doesn't bother me as much as having these other component parts in there that really have to do with procedure and policy.
Okay, which is the exact reason why we needed this conversation, because of how some of us view what a mission statement should be as opposed to how others see it. And we need clarity on what it's supposed to ultimately mean as an out-facing document. So I don't disagree, but if we're kind of confused about it, we send it out there in the world, and maybe the world will be confused about it. Exactly what does it mean, and how does it apply to me, or how are these people taking care of my interests? Because I don't know that I see it here in this mission statement. So anybody else have some comments about whether we send it back for a little bit of nurturing, and any of you can join that follow-up meeting just to make sure we're fairly clear, or do you want to move ahead with what you see in front of you?
I think, if I may, if that's okay.
Yes,
I didn't raise my hand, but
okay.
I think you have at least I have as a member of the subcommittee listening to the conversation, have a sense of, what people want and would not want in a statement. And I'm wondering if staff can then, like you're saying, finesse it and then re-present it to us so that we can give final comments. I wonder if that'll be a good process to move us along, and then also make sure that, the feedback that, you are wisely asking for, Isabel, is collected.
Thanks for that, Leandra. I agree. I mean, and that was the point of putting it on the table so everybody could please weigh in and share their thoughts on it. Maria, if we send it back, can we, and we finally come up with something a little more to everybody's liking, can we vote by email, or do we have to come back?
No, we would convene another meeting and then have the final vote and have a vote taken there.
Okay, well, I agree with Art that we don't want to spend all of our time here. And so does everybody agree with that? That we send it back for a little nurturing and then come back and hopefully it will serve what we hope is most of our concerns? Can I get an aye or a yay or a hands up or a thumbs up or something? Okay, good, all right. I only can see a few of the squares. So I'm not sure if I'm seeing all of the folk that need to vote on this. Okay, so I think that's appropriate. And I'm hoping, so we'll send it back, Maria, but I'm hoping also that once we hear from you and the communications team, that's also going to erase some concerns and doubts about where we might be moving forward with communications and the inclusion of the public at different levels. So thank you very much for that. That's very helpful. Sometimes we look at something in a vacuum like this or and we don't think outside that box. So thank you for the input. So now I'd like to turn it over to Maria Bonville, who's going to introduce us to her communications team. Or excuse me, Maria, was I supposed to ask for public comment?
No, there was no motion on the table.
Okay, very good, thank you. And you can introduce your team and tell us what you all have been working on.
Okay, great. So thank you and welcome to the Communications Subcommittee. I'm happy to see all of you, and we are really looking forward to your feedback and your ideas. We are very open to all suggestions, so thank you in advance. Katie, can you advance the slides? We start all our presentations with a reminder of the CIRM mission: accelerating world-class science to deliver transformative regenerative medicine treatments in an equitable manner to a diverse California and the world. CIRM is ultimately responsible for communicating this mission to a wide range of stakeholders, including the science community, patients and advocates, the media, state and federal lawmakers, and the people of California, especially underserved communities. Next slide, please. So our team, you already all know me, so we don't have to talk about me. The public outreach team has grown and will continue to grow over the next year. So let me tell you about all of them. Katie is our communications team coordinator. She's responsible for assisting the team with ongoing projects, helping with patient advocacy, and making sure we stay on track by providing much needed project management for the group. Katie has been involved with CIRM in one way or another for the past 10 years. Soon after her participation in a CIRM-funded trial for spinal cord injuries, Katie became a passionate advocate for stem cell research, as well as her community. Through her work with CIRM, Katie was inspired to return to her undergraduate studies and even earned her master's while living in London. She returned to the Bay Area last year, hoping to pick up where she left off, and she joined the CIRM team as the communications team coordinator. Next is Esteban Cortez. Esteban is our Director of Marketing and Communications. His responsibilities cover a range of just about everything, including social media, messaging, annual report, and blog posts. He has more than 10 years of marketing and communications experience in various industries, including real estate, home design, and medical. He most recently worked as a marketing manager for a homeless shelter in San Francisco, where he implemented messaging and introduced new digital marketing strategies to reach more donors and new communities. He's also a social media professional, photographer, graphic designer, and writer who hopes to share CIRM's impact stories effectively across our channels and is passionate about diversity, equity, and inclusion across all areas. Kevin McCormick this is a new position, our new Director of Patient Advocacy. And you all know Kevin, who carried most of the weight over the course of the last couple of years for all communications functions. What you may not know about Kevin is how deeply he cares about patients and advocates. So we created a new position, a Director of Patient Advocacy, because it needed its own voice. Kevin has been at the agency for almost 10 years and served as the Director of Communications and Patient Advocate Outreach. And before that, he had an almost 25-year career in journalism, much of that in local TV news in the San Francisco Bay Area, where the highlight was obviously working with Isabel. He has a long history of working with Isabel. When we got refunded and I was able to sit down and envision what a bigger comms team could look like, it was clear that patient advocacy was due its own focus and its own dedicated resource. And so that's where Kevin is. We'll add 2 positions, fiscal year 22-23, a community outreach coordinator and a media relations specialist. One area that has been neglected in our outreach is to underserved communities, and we need to correct that with advice from you and the work of a consultant to set a strategy for outreach to these communities. Prior to this meeting, I had conversations with Isabel and Pat about the agenda for this meeting. Isabel met with the team and we discussed bringing the committee up to speed on examples of the different methods we've used to reach our very diverse set of stakeholders, and also an update on the audit we're conducting of several of our social media channels. But mostly it was for our team and the subcommittee to get aligned on priorities and areas of focus for CIRM. From there, we'll come back to the subcommittee with a strategy based on input from you. With that, I will pass this along to Kevin to get us started.
Thank you, Maria, and thank you to the members of the subcommittee for coming together today. We're looking forward to working with you in the months and years to come to help shape our new communications messaging. As Maria said, before we started talking about what we want to do, we thought it made sense to talk a bit about what we've been doing to give some sort of context to the conversation. And so over the last 3 years, we've done more than 150 different public events. Pre-pandemic, they were often in person, like this photograph here, which was taken at Discovery Days at Oracle Park, where the Giants play. And that was a day-long science festival that had thousands of families, thousands of kids. And it was a great opportunity for us to have games and other things to engage the kids and then talk to the parents about the work that CIRM does. It gave us an opportunity to reach out to an audience that we often wouldn't get a chance to talk to. And a lot of our communications has been very targeted. Say, for instance, we're talking to Rotary clubs, science cafes, patient advocate conferences. Those are all very different audiences. And so we often tailored our message to suit that particular audience. Ironically, because of pandemic, we're actually able to reach out to a much wider group of people. Pre-pandemic, most of the meetings were in person. So geographically, for a state the size of California, that made it a little difficult for us to get around. With pandemic and everyone going on Zoom, we could do, last year, for example, we did dozens of Rotary Club meetings in San Diego and LA, all over Southern California, Fresno, and throughout the Central Valley, and of course here in the Bay Area, Northern California. So we were able to really expand our reach quite dramatically. Another area we've obviously tried to cultivate is the mainstream media, newspapers, radio, television, because they're still the best way of getting out a message to an awful lot of people in one go. Obviously, they've been facing some challenges, and we're going to talk about that a bit in a minute. And of course, social media was a huge piece for us. We would use Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, all those different channels. We have our own blog, and we use that to try and get the message out. Use Facebook Live, for example, to do very specialized targeting for different groups. So we would choose a disease area where we were funding a clinical trial, sickle cell disease or Lou Gehrig's disease or stroke. And then we will bring together the principal investigators for that research, the CIRM science officer in charge, and then a patient advocate connected to that research, because we always involve the patients and patient advocates in everything we do. It was a great way of reaching out to very targeted audiences and letting them know about the work we do. And so those were quite successful. And more recently, we've added to this list with a podcast talking about regeneration. And it's another way we're exploring to kind of reach out to a different audience. And it also gives me a chance to interview some really fun people. I'm sorry. So we're going to talk more about social media in just a moment. But first, I wanted to take a look at the challenges facing the mainstream media. And those are fairly sweeping. Since 2004, for example, more than 2,000 newspapers have gone out of business. And for those still in business, they're facing cutbacks. Like 30,000 journalists at newspapers and newsrooms around the country have lost their jobs over the last few years. That's more than a quarter of the total. Radio is experiencing similar cutbacks, and TV, broadcast TV, particularly local TV news, is facing challenges as well, cutbacks in everything, and they're trying to do an awful lot more with a lot less. And it doesn't look like this is going to be changing anytime soon. In 2020, for example, 1/3 of the newspapers that have Sunday newspapers that have a circulation of 50,000 or more had layoffs. And so that doesn't all go well for the future of the industry. One of the areas that's been particularly hard hit is specialist journalists. It used to be that local newspapers would have things like a court reporter, a labor reporter, even a religion reporter, let alone a health and medical one. Those have pretty much all gone the way of the dodo. Health and medical specialists are an endangered species. Many newspapers in California, and indeed throughout the country, don't even have one. And that's hard to replace because that kind of level of expertise and experience is really vital in producing kind of up-to-date reports. Newspapers and radio, TV are all trying to kind of fill the gap with wire reports or syndicated reports or using general assignment reporters. And they do a fine job, but it's not the same. And so clearly we're looking to kind of working with a different landscape than we used to have. Ironically, as the mainstream media is suffering, online media is growing and more resources and individuals are moving to that. And to talk more about that aspect, I'll hand you over to my colleague and the newest member of our communications team, Esteban Cortez.
Thank you, Kevin, and thanks everyone again for joining this meeting today. I'm really looking forward to working with you all, and it's great to finally meet you all. So going back to what Kevin said, as Kevin mentioned, the changing media landscape and the shift to digital is something that we're all well aware of. But that said, I really did want to recognize the CIRM team for adopting a lot of these channels and building our audience and online presence over the years. Really, the great thing is that many of these platforms already do have well-established audiences, speaking towards CIRM. As an example, our Facebook page already has over 11,000 followers. And as Kevin mentioned, the CIRM team has already hosted a ton of great virtual events there that had further reach than in-person events, which is great. So really our next step is now to determine the best ways to continue to grow these audiences and determine the content that they really want to see and engage with. So we'll do this by first conducting a thorough audit of our marketing and our communications channels, which is actually already in progress. So really what this means is that we're doing a deep dive into our email, print, podcast, website, video, social media, et cetera, all of those channels. And this audit is going to help us identify strengths, our challenges, and opportunities moving forward, and also help us develop the right messaging for each platform. It'll also help us develop the best tactics to reach our various stakeholders that Maria previously mentioned, and also identify other audiences that we may have missed. And once this audit is complete, we really do, what we want to do is we want to set measurable goals and track progress to support our team in making data-driven marketing decisions moving forward. I did also want to briefly touch on content and storytelling, as this is another audit that we're working on at the same time. We are already thinking of ways to improve the stories that we share and the way that we do it. I really do feel that the CIRM communications team brings unique storytelling backgrounds to the table, and we will use that to engage our stakeholders effectively. People really connect with stories about human connection. So moving forward, we are really striving to share more real-life, people-centric stories, as we promoted in our strategic plan, which was just introduced. So this includes profiling our diverse patients, students, grantees, and staff. And through this, we really want the people of California to understand why CIRM's work is important to them, their families, and communities. So that's what we really want to get out of our storytelling. And just going back to the channel audit insights, I just wanted to briefly share some quick examples of how we will be using these insights to guide our marketing campaigns. I wanted to highlight our blog traffic first. So the Stem Seller blog is one of our top communication channels with more than 100,000 unique visitors each year. We've actually found that our blog traffic was down in 2021, and that could be because of changes in CIRM's team structure and also changes in social media algorithms over the years. So we would use these insights to set goals around boosting blog traffic, perhaps even consider social media advertising, which tends to be much more cost-effective and targeted. It's just one example. Another example of web traffic insights, we found that some of our top visited pages on our website still focus on basic education around stem cells, meaning that there are still people who are Googling what is a stem cell and landing on our website. So looking at these insights, we may prioritize awareness and education campaigns in the future. And looking at our audience insights, which you can see here on the right for LinkedIn, the beauty about having all of these insights is that we can get a snapshot of who makes up our audience. So for example, looking at these LinkedIn audience demographics, we found that a big chunk of our audience is in research, business development, and education. So moving forward, we may use that platform to promote our scientific blogs and publications. So this is just a very brief snapshot of the insights that we've been looking at. We will continue to do this research so that we continue to build strong marketing program here at CIRM. And I did also want to point out that we are already using these insights to introduce campaigns in this new year, such as our campaign to promote our strategic plan, which is launching this month. And in that campaign, we're using current best practices and the multi-channel tools that we have available to promote the plan. And that includes email marketing, social media, and the blog. So with that said, again, thank you everyone for being here today. And I'll now pass the mic to our communications coordinator, Katie, who will talk about some of our specific Q1 goals.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Esteban, and thank you to everyone for joining us today. I'm very excited to share some of our goals for this quarter. First and foremost, being the reconvening of this Communications Subcommittee. So welcome, everyone. I'm glad to meet everyone finally, albeit virtually. We realize how important it is for us to have feedback and guidance on how we're doing and how we can do even better. And what's great is that you each have unique perspectives. And what we really hope to do is to harness your expertise, the expertise of the members of this subcommittee to help guide and support us in delivering our messaging in the most inclusive and equitable manner. And as we mentioned in our mission statement as well, linguistically and culturally appropriate to our very diverse audience. And having you guys is great. I love that everyone is very opinionated and you guys have perspectives that I personally, when I'm writing something, I don't even think about. So I really love that we have such a diverse group of people in this committee, and we're really looking forward to meeting again and again whenever that is. But let's move on to our other goal that Esteban went a little bit over this. I don't want to get too into detail. He went over the marketing and communication audit that we're doing. We're also doing a social media audit specifically. And that's to come up with a strategy for us to share our content with our audience in the most effective way. And as both Kevin and Esteban mentioned, social media isn't going anywhere, and it has, for the most part, replaced traditional media. So our focus really is to do a deep dive into each social media platform, looking at our current efforts to try and figure out what has worked, what hasn't. Each platform has its own audience. It's suited to a different audience has different types of levels of engagement. So through this audit, what we really hope is to gain those audience insights and build our content strategy based on those findings about each channel specifically. And of course, each step of the way, we will be setting measurable goals to track our progress over time and stay on top of trends, which will hopefully only keep us improving. And I'll hand it back to Maria.
So that leads us now to questions for the subcommittee that we have. This is just we could be here all day with questions we have, but we really want to hear from you about how to focus sort of our messaging, what messages should we be out there with, and are there key communication channels CIRM has missed? Are there areas where we have not touched upon? I mean, I can think of one. We have not, again, done a lot of outreach to underserved communities. So how best we could move forward in that direction. And so I give it back to you, Isabel.
Thanks, Maria. I had a couple of ideas myself, but I see that David has got his hand up. So go ahead, David.
Very short question. Can you give us an example, Katie, of what a rubric of measurement would be for your deciding whether a certain aspect of the communication world is working for us or not? What would be an example of what you would measure?
I can't think of anything. Esteban, do you want to go over
How many
this?
people log on in a day? How many people?
I mean, it's
log
different.
on?
It's going to change based on every campaign and every social media. So I don't have one singular answer. Like I said, if Esteban has a better one.
Yeah, sure. I can touch on that. And that's actually something that we are really hoping to get out of this audit, is really figuring out what are those metrics that we will be taking a look at, that we will be tracking over time. And it really does vary, just like Katie said. So for example, if we're setting an awareness goal, that could be, how many mentions do we have on Twitter? How many mentions do we have on Facebook? Are we getting tagged on LinkedIn to expand our reach? We may look at engagement on Instagram, for example. So it really does vary. And really our audit is very thorough, and that each week we actually have a deadline where we will be looking at those things. And we haven't quite got to which specific metrics we'll be measuring, but that's actually coming up very soon. So that's just to give a quick example.
But you have objective criteria in mind.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we're going to be setting goals, and through that, we're going to find a way to measure that and set KPIs so that we can track and make sure that our marketing is actually working.
And just to add to that, David, when we did Facebook Live events, for example, we would get maybe 30, 40, sometimes 70 people watching one event live. But over the course of several weeks, we would get many, many more hundreds. In fact, with the stroke Facebook Live, we ended up with like 5,000 people. So it's not just a question of the immediate hit with things like Facebook Live and also the podcast. Those are things that have legs and then can produce results much later as well.
So as a follow-up question, Kevin, and then I'll shut up. How do you see, you've got a team now that you didn't have before.
Mm-hmm.
How do you see the interaction between the team and you, and the team and the board, and the team and the staff to be different than it was prior to this effort right now?
I think we're going to be more targeted. So in the past, there were a lot of kind of generalists where we would all do a bit of everything. Now we've got much more specialists. We've got Katie as a project manager and who's going to oversee an awful lot of the work that we do. We've got Esteban doing social media. We've had people do social media in the past, but no one with his background, his depth of knowledge and expertise. I mean, already he's made great changes to some of the things, the documents we've been producing, and added extra flair and style, so it's visually more appealing. So we're going to have more specialists, and it will then free me up to do some of the things that I particularly love doing, which is talking to the public and working with the community and advocating out there. So I think in that sense, we'll be able to we'll still work together as a team, still write blogs and do a lot of the things that we've done in the past. But we'll be able to have expertise to draw on and say, Esteban, what do you think about this? How should we dress this up? And Katie, how's this project going on? And as Maria said, there'll be more people coming on board next year. So that will give us an even bigger team and an even greater ability to reach out to the public, I think.
So what you're saying, Kevin, is as good as you guys have been thus far, it's only going to get better.
As good as those guys have been. I've been rubbish. If you saw the blog figures, 2021 was when I was on my own and they went down. So clearly I'm rubbish at that. So that's why we bring these other people on to make us even better. Yes.
Well, I think nothing is rubbish and everything is a wonderful, effort. But before I go to you, JT, I wanted to respond to Kevin's word engagement, because that can mean a number of things to a number of people. So are we talking about engaging out? And when we're engaging out, what are the results of that engagement? Just because they're listening doesn't mean we've moved somebody to sign up for a trial. Are we doing any kind of measuring, even surveying within those Facebook Lives or anything else amongst the listening audience that would query them? Like, why are you listening? And give them and get some answers. Would you join us in a trial if you could? Things like that, just to survey them so we understand how to reach back out again and really get them engaged, as opposed to anybody just opening a page and reading something or listening about it.
Absolutely agree, Isabella. And I think that we've started to really shift our focus on what engagement means. And I think before, when we would go to events, we would go and we would talk and talk and talk and talk. We'd say, are there any questions? And then that was sort of it. And now it's much more of a, what do you need from us? Let's have a conversation. You know, what information can we provide? What do we need to know about you in order for us to be better? So it really is much more of a back and forth exchange versus just, you know, there's benefit to us going places and saying, here's who CIRM is, here's what a stem cell is, here's what regenerative medicine is. And that definitely has its place. But I think more and more what we have to do is that sort of conversation about, you know, what do you need from us? Why are you here? Would you be interested in X? How can we provide more service for you? So I think that shift is definitely happening as we speak.
Okay, JT?
Yes, thank you, Isabel. Two questions for you guys. One on the blog. So while everything we produce is most helpful and informative, the blog is something that I think is a unique tool in that it really does a great job of explaining in plain English what a particular project has done. And thereby not only is informative, but it to some extent reaches the question of what's a stem cell, how does it work, and all that. And I think the public can learn a lot about what we do by it and read some super interesting stuff. So my question, Kevin, is or to all is how do you go about increasing the viewership? How do you sort of advertise that it's out there? Because I think we really want to dramatically increase that as one of the prime communication methods. So that's question number one. Question number two, entirely separate topic, is what, in addition to figuring out what CIRM can do to better communicate, one of the things that we've done over the years is helping to coach the grantees to communicate. And we had from time to time this great mechanism of the 30-second elevator pitch training for our grantees that allows them to better communicate. The grantees are wonderful scientists. They're not always great communicators because they, let's face it, deal a great deal in jargon. They perhaps assume that the public understands a bit more than they actually do. And so an effort to really focus on educating and engaging them in the communications process, I think would be a useful thing to ramp up again. So those are my two comments.
Well, I think I'll leave the idea about how do we promote and get a bigger audience for the blog to Esteban, because that's one of the reasons why we brought him on with his level of expertise. In terms of working with grantees, we're always happy to do that. Actually, when we did the grantee meeting last year, or even though it was virtual, we recorded a number of kind of little vignettes from researchers that were funding. And we worked very hard with them to make sure that when they did the Zoom presentation, that they could deliver a message in understandable English in about 3 minutes. And we had a really good response. I mean, most of them were terrific at it. Some of them needed to work a little bit more, but most of them are good. And I think there's a bigger understanding now than ever before of the need to be a good communicator. I know that the PIOs at all the academic institutions that we fund and the media people at the companies that we're funding are really working hard with the scientists to try and get them to be able to communicate in a much better way. And we're happy to kind of amplify that when we get a chance. Obviously, with the pandemic, it's kind of limited our ability to do so. But once we start getting back into normal, we're happy to take our team on the road and go do media trainings anywhere they want us to.
Yeah, I mean, is there a way to, this is sort of a bit of an odd suggestion, but to almost require, as when we give grants, that there's an interaction with our communications team to educate them on this so that we don't miss anybody and don't leave to sort of chance and haphazard response as to who actually is involved in this?
That's above my pay rate.
Build it into the grant. Part of the obligation is to, in fact, attend one of these media training sessions or something. I don't I don't know how, it's not about coercion, but it really is, I think, an important issue, JT, and I'm glad that you did say, how can we sort of make them do this as opposed to let it be their choice? The work that I've done in media with researchers is they're quite reluctant to come to the draw. They don't like to deal with media per se, et cetera, which has been sort of the bane of media existence, because they need that interaction with researchers in order to understand correctly the issue so they can translate it for the public. And that has always been the challenge in becoming, as Kevin talked about, the sparse media landscape and even fewer reporters who are science reporters, trained science reporters. It will become even more difficult given the increasing amount of science and complexity, and fewer reporters who can put their arms around that easily. So we need researchers to just be better communicators. And I don't know what we can do. Maybe, is Maria in the room? Maybe, I don't know. Maria.
Before Maria, can I just add one other thing? There's an additional agenda to this suggestion, which is it's been aptly pointed out most recently by Mr. Jensen that CIRM is not sufficiently reflected in comments by our grantees with respect to the projects that we fund, and to have some sort of required interaction with the communications team will only serve to further getting the public awareness built up that CIRM is actually heavily involved across all the various projects in our portfolio.
To that point, JT, I think one of the problems is not necessarily the grantees, because the ones I've spoken to certainly always make a point of mentioning us and being grateful for the funding we offer. It's just not a high priority in many of the articles that are written or the stories that are told either on radio or TV. It's the funding is not a sexy issue. So they're looking for the human part of it, and they ignore the fact that without the funding, none of that happens. They've certainly made an effort to do it. And I've talked to reporters as well, and they say they've tried to include it, but often it gets cut out for space.
Space and time. Yeah. Space and time. Yeah.
And I will go back to, we could set something up where it was a couple of times a year where grantees, we held a, it's either Zoom or in person or whatever, a communications sort of summit or 30-second elevator pitch. I think to require it on an individual basis may not be realistic given the size of our team, considering we have, how many hundreds of grantees. So that might not be as realistic, but doing it in mass in a coordinated way might be a little more realistic and could be really beneficial.
Don't
Esteban, did you want to answer the question about boosting the blog numbers?
Yeah, I can actually just touch on that. JT, I did want to point out that we already are, excuse me, we are already starting to shift towards a more campaign focused strategy. So even, using our strategic plan campaign, for example, we said, okay, we just launched our new strategic plan. What is the best way to promote that? And, really with that, we decided on tactics. We set a goal, which, is to increase traffic or to direct traffic to a landing page. With that, we then said, okay, so let's do some blog posts around that. Let's ask some staff to post this to social media. And those are really the kinds of things that we are going to be doing moving forward. So for the blog, we may set that as a goal to increase traffic. Should we consider paid social media advertising? Is there a really critical article that we want our audiences to read? What are ways that staff can engage to boost our traffic as well? And we've already even started reaching out to other foundations and organizations. So for example, I reached out to a sickle cell foundation, and I really just introduced myself and said, hey, we're funding, a lot of this great research. What's the type of content that you want to boost, send out to your audiences so that we can consider that in the future and have them promote that for us. So we really are just thinking of all these different ways, and that's really what we hope to get out of this audit, which really then will lead to a more robust content strategy. So hopefully that answers the question a bit.
Can I stop us at this
Leandra
time
has her hand
for
raised.
a time check? It's 11:33. So, and sorry, Maria and David, I'll get to you in 1 minute, but remember that one of the things on the slide was what messages do we want to focus on? I mean, we'd love to do everything, but where we want some return, I think, and where I think this is near and dear to Art's heart, and that is maybe we need one of the major focuses on the specialty centers and how that will impact low income and vulnerable populations, and how we can make sure that the messaging is targeted for them to engage, for them to know it exists, what it exists for, how they can be helped or their communities can be helped for it, and then how they can participate. I think that is really crucial to see a return on all of this effort being put into messaging and communications, where we want to see an increase and effort and response and engagement from these vulnerable populations to know that they too can participate, and that, you know, that perhaps their health concerns will be addressed. So that is what I would put front and center on the table as one of the messages and strategies we need to work around. There might be others, but we're looking for results messaging. We're looking for that which is a payoff for California residents and taxpayers. So let me
Isabel Leandra has had her hand raised for a bit. So
okay, because David had been shaking his hand as well. So Deandra, go ahead, and then Leandra, and then David.
Hi, yes, thank you. Just a couple comments. One, you know, I think it's really, I love the report. I love the branding and what I've been seeing. It's really, really great. And some of the outreach. And so in thinking about outreach, you know, I think that you all have demonstrated that you've gone into the communities and put on events and those types of things. But I'm wondering if, you know, there's been thought to really asking grassroots organizations in line with what Isabel was talking about, to promote as well, not just to, will you come or be educated, but as a result, will you also pass on this information in a really deliberate fashion to their networks? And I think one way to do that would be to provide a social media kit. I don't know if you do that already, but that's really helpful with, here's the hashtags, here's the messaging. So it's really easy for them to just cut and paste instead of just saying, well, can you promote? And then you're hoping that somebody has the time and effort and desire to do so. Perhaps you do that already, not sure, but maybe really taking a look at that and beefing that up. So it's really easy for people to use, not just, you know, the organizations, but also the grantees as well. When someone was earlier talking about asking them to promote and making that maybe a requirement, not sure about that, but really giving them, laying it out for them. So it's super easy. That's my suggestion.
Excellent point. And I think Esteban talked about reaching out to the sickle cell foundations and stuff, and that's the absolute deliberate, intentional ways we need to go out to the communities that are being impacted by these particular diseases that are being investigated and researched, and talk about those impacts and the money invested. And yes, they should be saying that. The researchers should be saying, this research has been made possible by these investments from the people of California. And that's like every single time they need to be saying that. You know, it may become an old mantra and refrain, but that's what people need to hear. This is money you invested. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, from the researchers, right? And from the people who are served by it. David, and then Art.
Very quickly. First of all, I think we should look at what Leandra said, but also look at her slide. This is a woman who knows what she's doing and is promoting an image to us that's very simple. It was very simple for her to do, presumably. But look at it. Look at the difference. Look at my backyard. I mean, I think that's just a perfect example of what we're trying to emphasize here. So thank you, Leandra, for the setup. And the only thing else I wanted to add was. I can hear Maria's point of view that you don't want to require researchers to necessarily participate in a translation process of science, but I think that there's not, in my experience, I'm a sort of a professional full-time volunteer patient advocate in San Diego for Parkinson's, and I know what the Parkinson's researchers want, and I know what the Parkinson's patients want. And you guys are about to deliver that. And that's going to make a huge difference if somebody in the Parkinson's community broadly, whether it's a scientist or a patient, can say, well, I don't know the answer, but I know where to go get it. We want to be I know where to go get it. And I would use that as our criteria for success. If you ask a patient who has Parkinson's disease to tell you about something relevant, where do they go? The first thing out of their mouth should be to CIRM with respect to stem cells. And the way you can get to them, so we're talking about what to do. DEI is what was brought up, and it makes perfect sense. But the thing that wasn't brought up that I think is really, really important to patients and raises our credibility is to help coach people about fraud in stem cells. Now you may think, well, fraud has nothing to do with what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to promote clinical trials and stuff. The first thing out of people's mouths are, is this real or is this fake? Do I believe what they're saying, or should I just ignore it? So DEI, yes, give that to the researchers and train them how to deal with that. But we've got to give to patients some hope that we are a resource for them to not get screwed up. And I just want to underscore the success and professionalism of Kevin in the past. I've been here for 8 years or whatever. And he knows what the patients want and need. He knows what the researchers should be doing and how they can help. And I think he understands that the researchers are scared, if we will, because they don't know what's going to come at them from the public. They're scared of the public. And then you look at what sort of happened over the past few days from a political point of view, and how science is just it's open season. So people enjoy trashing science. So anyway, so that enough said. Leandra, thank you.
Thank you, David. I know, and I think that's why we need to be transparent and open and available. So thank you for that. I agree. I see that Lauren just joined us. I hope that maybe she's been with us and would like to make a comment, but I'm going to go to Art first, Lauren, but if you'd like to have something to say afterwards.
Three items. Number one, for 12 years, we've been asking grantees to include us in their press releases, and many of them still do not. I recently had to intervene as a regent with the University of California, with whom we've given $1.16 billion over the last 12 years, and they didn't even mention us in a release from the office of the president. So I spoke to the president, I spoke to the head of communications, and this was a lesson for me. The same thing that we need to apply to other universities is not only go to the press release of the grantee, but go to the director of communications of that institution to remind them what needs to be included in their press releases, because they also have a role in this. As to fraud, Jeff Lomax and I have been working for the last 3 years and 4 years before that on stem cell clinics, which are unscrupulous. The Board of Medical Quality Assurance doesn't even take a step to disciplining doctors who are running these stem cell clinics. That's where the issue of fraud has to occur. We're going to continue to do that this year. But again, thank God there may be a scandal, as I've talked to the president of our state Senate, Senator Atkins, who's moving on this, in that the Board of Medical Quality Assurance is protecting these doctors and not moving against them. And that affects our patients and our patients' ability to access quality care.
Thank you, Art. I really appreciate those updates. It's really important for us to know as well. We've only got 18 minutes left. I think we may have a public comment. I want to make sure we get that in. Lauren, did you have anything you wanted to add to the conversation?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I was here at the last 5 minutes. I had a call and stepped off, but then just got back. But I mean, look, I think I've said this before to this group, but to me, I think one of the biggest barriers we have is that often scientists don't speak the same language as the rest of humanity. And so, I sit in the meetings and I pick up, a lot. And at this point, it's been a number of years, so I get a lot more. But I'll be honest, half the time, I don't actually understand the science of what we're voting on. And so to me, and I've said this, I don't know to anyone in this group before, but I don't understand why presenting your work, public speaking isn't a class that scientists are also given, because they all do it so poorly usually. And so, and they spend so much time trying to sound fancy and to use big words that are scientific so that we make sure that they're saying important things. Mm-hmm. But normal people don't often get it. So to me, I think that a lot of the work that we can do is translating some of the really, again, as I've said this before, amazing, really incredible work that we do to normal person language. And translate it out there. And that when we send a tweet out into the world or an Instagram video or an email or whatever it is, it's written by a normal human, not a scientist.
And as we know, Lauren, having worked with a lot of scientists on CIRM itself, we know they're very human, very kind, and very thoughtful. It's unfortunately, I think it goes with the PhD that you have to talk a certain way.
They just have to dumb it down a little sometimes. And so,
no, I always say, speak English.
but yeah, that's my comment. But you know, I think that's really huge and key toward getting, you know, translating what we do, but also letting people know that we can help them.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely. And I think that that's why we're having this meeting, we're having this committee, and we're trying to turn over the newest leaf, because I know that the effort has always been there over time, but I think with the build out of the committee and the staff, that's really helpful, because yes, we need all bodies on board. And so we're hoping that we're going to get there, and that we're going to now really reach out to the variety of people in our communities in different ways, Esteban, and not the same old, and find out where they live and how to talk to them and what they really care about. So we're going to do that. Want to make sure that we're staying on track. So I see, Pat, you go ahead.
Okay. As a scientist. You know, it's not about, you know, there aren't courses in either medical school or graduate school that really touch upon the core components of how to communicate complicated issues in an appropriate way, where it's not watered down, but yet it's understandable. So, you know, and I've spent 20 years working on this with the Center on a Developing Child at Harvard, and you go to that website or go to the Aldous Center for Science Communication. So it's not about shorter sentences and simpler words. It's about understanding cultural issues, how you frame, how you tell a story. Telling personal stories for certain audiences works, but it's not generalizable, which means that it backfires in terms of it growing, in terms of salience and relevance. So some of what we are going to try to do, I think, needs to look at the research that's been done about communicating medicine and science in ways that the public is going to embrace. I agree completely with the team that, you know, like 20 years ago when we started this, and our focus was child and brain development, and brain development is not that simple, right? It's as complicated, more complicated than stem cells. But what we were doing 20 years ago, or even 10 years ago, is just not relevant now. We were writing working papers and in briefs and things like that. Written documents just are not downloaded in the same way that videos are and other sorts of social media that's being used. So I think the team is on the right track. I would say that looking back and looking to see who are your highest clients in terms of hitting the website is a little bit troubling for me, because this is not about communicating the science to scientists. We do that through professional journals and other strategies. So those numbers that are on the bottom,
yes,
like a few percent, really have to. So I just want to say that the strategy is not to do more of what you've done in terms of connecting to the scientists and business leaders. They make up those two groups make up, or business folks, they make up the two largest groups. Is to figure out how to get the other components of the communities, broadly speaking, to engage. Not easy. So I'm not saying that it's easy. I'm just saying that thinking about how to do things a little differently is going to matter. And then also looking at the research that's been done about what works and what doesn't work, about talking about science and medicine would be really helpful.
Yeah. Sometimes, thank you, Pat. Those are all absolutely important points and very very important to be said. Maria, I want to just be respectful of people's time. Wonder, is there someone out there waiting to make a public comment? I'll get to you too as well. We just have to keep our comments. There is someone out there.
I see one number. I'm not sure if they will be providing public comment or not. They may have just joined the meeting. I'm not quite sure.
Let me then proceed with both JT and then Leandra.
So briefly, Kevin, I'm going to go back to the blog here for a second again, because I think it's such a valuable tool. And you guys may do this already, I'm not sure. But what about the idea of integrating it as part of our educational pillar of getting the blog to every middle school and high school biology teacher and every community college and college professor in biology or anything that's related to it? That would, I think that you would end up greatly increasing your viewership, because you'll have many students who would join in and find it, again, very interesting. And it has the sort of the double feature value of providing something that is so interesting that it increases their interest level in the field in general, and helps incrementally to point them towards going into this as they progress along educationally. Do we do anything like that?
In the past, we've gone to teachers' conferences to promote what we do. Mostly, though, it was focused on the educational curriculum that we'd already put together for teachers, science teachers, to teach in both middle and high school. But that's an excellent idea. I really like that, going in and kind of getting in touch with all the science teachers, and there's kind of associations of them all around the state and the country. So it would be a great way to try and kind of get a bigger audience. So thanks, JT. That's really good.
Yeah, and you use that. Correct. I was going to say that this is something that could go beyond California also. If you could figure out how to tap into these teachers all over the place, you would dramatically increase awareness of what we're doing in the field in general.
Yeah, we're shameless about trying to get our numbers up any way we can.
Yeah.
Yeah, you might start with the impact of COVID and the fact that we invested in COVID, et cetera, and connect the dots for them and make it relevant and present. So I agree. Just fabulous when we just started with all of our big ideas here, and we've got to turn this meeting down so we can let you go to lunch if you want to. But Leandra, you go first, and then David. You're muted.
You're on mute, Leandra.
Thanks. It is lunchtime. I love that idea, John. And I also really appreciate what Pat's comments, because I think that they tie to kind of the comment I was making earlier about, and I hope this was picked up on. It's not about just sending the messaging and having people promote it. I think it's about who's sending the message, right? And we know that word of mouth going viral is going to happen if you have cultural brokers who people trust. Even if we're in the right spaces to reach the right audience, if people don't know and trust CIRM or think of it as an important kind of voice, then we need someone that they know and trust to send that message, right? So even if we partner with community members and we highlight people that look like other people, if the folks in their community or the leaders in their community aren't endorsing and putting it out, then we may be running up against a wall. And so I think if there's ways to adapt our messaging and have it come from cultural brokers who could then promote it to their networks. And I'm talking about preparing it for people, not just asking, like having it be very clear. Here you go. Here's, sample, messaging that you can use or we encourage. So I'll leave it there, but.
Yeah, and I think we need to make sure that we try to address community leaders of all ages, and not just seniors down, but youth up, because oftentimes they are the brokers of those messages. And it may be in that simplistic fashion in which they need to at least, start to get the interest of their elders or something, And so I think it's really crucial that we see this dynamic across the age ranges, because I think youngsters are our future and our future investigators. So we want to build that through education, but then they also can take home messages to grandma. So that's really, and to mother and father. So I think it's really, really crucial that we always keep that in mind. David, you had a last word, and Maria, you said there's nobody waiting for comments?
Okay, I got a very quick point just to summarize the last two speakers. I think we should consider breaking down our tasks for this group into three or four categories. The one, I'll just call it DEI for everybody knows what that means, what we're trying to do. So there's DEI, that's a target. Patients, that's a unique target. Scientists, researchers, that's a unique target. And then maybe some overlapping targets, such as the term cultural brokers, community leaders, things like that. But I see DEI, the community, DEI, which is a subset of that, scientists and patients. And we should focus our craft our message in those ways, is my opinion.
Yeah. So it says to me that given all of those topics, David, that meeting twice a year is not quite an answer to, if we want to provide that guidance and also give praise where it's due with how the work is progressing. So maybe I put it on the table right now, Maria, whether or not we want to move to, someone wants to move a motion, or we just agree that we want to move maybe in the next several months and not 6 months from now.
Sure. No, we don't need a motion for that, but if the subcommittee wants to set a timeline to reconvene with, and then we can work on what exactly you would like the team to bring back to you at that moment or at that point, happy to do that. So I leave it up to you guys to let us know timing and just deliverables so that you can start to weigh in and not start, you weighed in, but to give us more feedback on where we are.
So could I have at least a show of hands from people, given more like a quarterly meeting, if we would like perhaps to gather again? Oh, David's hand's already up, but I'm not sure whether we want to meet maybe by, I don't know, Pat, maybe beginning of April, the next meeting. That'll give time to work with the team to nuance the mission statement and to start some of those next strategic steps based on this conversation.
Yeah, I would say so that, I mean, we really need to have this mission statement, tight and completed, as well as begin working with the team. But I think end of March, very beginning of April for me would be fine. We have to meet more regularly if this subcommittee is going to make any headway, right, and work in a collaborative way with the communications team. We need to meet more often. Not that I'm a big fan of
meetings,
but I think we have to do that. We have to start. I mean, it may be that,
the front end,
as we get business done, we can tell, streamline it a bit more, but right now we have to meet more often.
Yeah. So Maria, can you maybe send out a query for certain numbers of dates in either late March or early April, so that for
Absolutely.
The next meeting?
Absolutely.
Okay. And I didn't hear your final. Is there anybody in the public waiting to make comments?
No one is in the waiting room. We can ask for public comment and see if the one member of the public who's joined in would like to make any public comments, but I don't know.
Okay. We're open to public comments now if anybody out there does wish to make a comment, but if there isn't anybody.
I see they've unmuted, so I suspect yes.
Okay. That's phone number 424?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead. Are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear
Yes.
you. I think,
Great, thank you.
hang on one second. Maria, she has what, 2 minutes?
It's a three-minute public
3
comment.
minutes. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, state your name and go for
Sure.
it.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Nancy Renee. I am a patient advocate for people with sickle cell disease. I'm a member of the CAP program, and I've been working with CIRM for a number of years. I made my first presentation about 12 years ago, speaking about advocacy for people with sickle cell disease. As a research institution, I hope that CIRM will recognize the importance of conducting research that is free from the biases of the past. Research on heart disease that did not include women or work that focused on cystic fibrosis, where it was studied at a higher rate than sickle cell disease, even though numbers of sickle cell patients are 3 times greater. Racism is often said to be structural. It is a tangled web that reaches to many corners of our society, but we must start somewhere if we were to move forward in a more equitable manner. And here's where I get into some of the strategies that you might want to look at in terms of achieving the goals of your mission statement. Adding an additional CAP advisor to each team. This should be a person from an underserved community. Provide training so that the advisor will understand their importance to the program. If CAP advisors are not part of the minority population, it is hard to imagine that the minority viewpoint is being expressed. Continue training programs for underserved minority students, develop pathways for them to join research teams. Diversity in a research team may help rebuild the trust that is currently lacking in the patient population. Outreach to doctors serving inner city and under-resourced areas. Share current research with them and develop ways for them to make connections with research fellows. Many inner city patients and their doctors do not have vibrant connections to researchers, so Black and Latino patients may be unaware of research that can benefit them. Develop ways to address equity issues and write them into funding guidelines. The guidelines should look at ways to build trust, reduce racism, make research findings useful to traditionally underserved communities. Funded research has to make sense scientifically and ethically. Spending taxpayer dollars on research that is only available to one segment of the population only repeats the sins of the past, where the affluent and middle class can take advantage of treatments that the poor and underserved cannot. With guidelines in place, CIRM can lead the way to more effective treatment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sorry. Thank you very much for that. I think that she's echoing everything that is on our plate, everything that we have been talking about, particularly in the last year, and as we head through to DEI and the things that David mentioned, the different groups that we have to reach out to, but always remember that they should be inclusive. So thank you very much. We really appreciate that. We hope that through communications, we're going to allow people to recognize we are in fact trying to address all of what she cares about and is concerned about, because I think that we truly are. Maria, if there is no other business, I would like to thank everybody for the robust conversation and your engagement in the conversation and with ideas, et cetera, et cetera. And you'll be hearing from Maria to set up our next meeting. Unless anybody else has a blessing to share with us to end the meeting, I will just say, have a good afternoon, stay safe out there, and continue to be smart.
Excellent job, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, JT.
Everyone.
My maiden voyage.
Good job by the team. This is great. Excellent.
No, we're really excited.
And remember,
Thank you, everybody. Take care.
remember that COVID is not dead. So
That's true. That's right.
And neither are we.
No,
right,
we're still kicking.
are out off the charts. So speaking by somebody who has COVID right now because of.
Oh, take care of yourself, David.
Oh, David, take